Everybody, welcome to RotoWire. Jeff Erickson and Nick Whalen here. Welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Silly me not closing the YouTube window there. Sorry about that. I did this 2 weeks in a row. Good job. It's a chaotic week 5 already, Nick. Just got news during the SiriusXM show that we do that Lamar Jackson's hamstring injury will keep him out this week and maybe 2 to 3 weeks. Worst news on a bonfire of a season already for the Ravens.
Yeah, you would like to say that the Ravens, being the Ravens, have some sort of cushion here and, a 2 to 3 week absence for Lamar Jackson. That's something they could survive. But the Ravens are 1-3. And, taking that loss to the Chiefs, especially in the fashion that they lost that game in week 4, I think makes this even more brutal. And, we had an inkling that obviously something was going on with Lamar, but there was so much kind of mystery around that situation. At first you're wondering, did they just straight up bench him? Are they considering this game out of reach? And then you see the little wrap on his hamstring on the bench. So it's certainly a legitimate injury for Lamar. And now obviously we have confirmation of that, but it's not just Lamar Jackson, right? You have all these injuries on the defensive side of the ball. It's already been a bad defense. And now you're taking away potentially 2 starters in the secondary. They're not going to have Roquan Smith for a couple of weeks. Matabike's done for the year. The Ravens are in real trouble. And we've obviously seen a huge move in that line this week against the Houston Texans. Ravens are at home. They were 3.5 point favorites. They are now 2.5 point dogs. It's interesting though, when you look at the futures market with Baltimore, the books aren't completely jumping off. The Ravens are still plus 550 right now to win the AFC. They are still currently favored by a pretty decent margin to win their division. They're minus 145 to win the AFC North. And look, I guess on paper, this is still technically a winnable game against the Houston Texans because of how bad that offense has been. But I think this is now advantage Houston. In 2 weeks from now, you got to play the LA Rams, likely without Lamar Jackson. I mean, there's a real path to 1-5 here for Baltimore.
Yeah, that's just going to say, they don't even have the banked wins. That's the thing that's really tough is they had this really front-loaded, difficult schedule. They didn't get through it very well, and now it's gotten worse. That game against the Chiefs wasn't very competitive even. That's the thing that's kind of crazy is even before the injury, things were bad. And maybe he was hurt early. And maybe that's one thing we don't, I haven't seen the video of the exact play where he got hurt. But perhaps this is something that was hampering things all along because this offense wasn't clicking after that first drive. That's one of the super sneaky things about that game.
Yeah. And look, I like the Chiefs to win that game. I think my final score prediction was 24-23. I did not see this being a complete blowout that felt like it was over midway through the third quarter. The Ravens just don't get blown out like that. And this is now 2 weeks in a row. I know the final score against Detroit ended up being a 1-score game, but that one felt like a blowout. And, the Ravens have been physically dominated now in 2 straight weeks. Okay. You take Lamar Jackson out of the equation. Obviously that's a huge hindrance to an offense that already can't really run the ball. I mean, this is 3 straight complete duds now out of Derrick Henry. They went away from him despite having some success early in that game against Kansas City. And, what's different this year versus when Lamar has missed time in the past is they, traditionally they had always had Stu Huntley is the default backup quarterback for the Baltimore Ravens. And, it's all right, you could kind of run the same thing. He's not Lamar Jackson, but he could kind of do some Lamar-like things. Cooper Rush, man, we haven't seen a Ravens quarterback like this in a very long time. A traditional immobile drop back passer. And you're going up against what's still one of the best defenses in football, a defense coming off of a shutout, albeit against the Tennessee Titans. That is a contributing factor, but I mean, this is a nightmare, man. I mean, is there anyone in this offense who you actually feel the same or better about if you're removing Lamar Jackson for a couple of weeks? Does this in any way help a Mark Andrews or a Zay Flowers? I don't know.
Yeah, Mark Andrews would be my guess, and it's a guess at that because maybe you don't think of as many long distance throws. You think of just more throws, period, though, because they just. Take away Lamar's mobility, and I think it hampers the running game as a whole. So, yeah, maybe more checkdowns to Justice Hill. I don't know, good luck banking on that. It's going to be a really complicated waiver wire week, and it's starting at quarterback there. We've got 4 teams on bye for the first time of this season. No Caleb Williams, no Jordan Love, Michael Penix in Superflex leagues, and Aaron Rodgers in Masochist leagues. So there's, a lot of places there, although to be fair, Rodgers has actually been pretty decent, but that's 4 quarterbacks off the top. Then you take away Lamar, let's start off in non-super flex leagues. Master J3 is asking, do you go Bryce Young or Cooper Rush this week? Bryce Young has got a pretty decent matchup against Miami. I know there's been very little to go on that makes us believe in Bryce Young, but this is a decent matchup there. I'm leaning Bryce Young in this spot.
Bryce Young for me. Bryce Young for me. Harbaugh will do what he can to get Cooper Rush ready, but it's like, even if Lamar was starting this game, obviously you would have him in your starting lineup, but you wouldn't feel great about it. It's the Houston Texans defense, so I still really value the strength of that Houston defense. Again, you're without all these pieces defensively. I mean, Cooper Rush he's not a total disaster, right? We're not talking full Skylar Thompson here. He has experience at the NFL level. Like I don't think this is going to be, a game where the Ravens come out and score 3 points. They could probably move the ball a little bit, but you have all these weapons who are kind of tailored specifically to Lamar in a lot of ways. And, Cooper Rush now has really not a lot of experience throwing to any of these guys. You're trying to build this chemistry over the course of a week. It sounds crazy to say you'd start Bryce Young, but I would happily start Bryce Young at home against the Miami Dolphins.
Poor Skylar Thompson taking strays in the same week where he just got mugged in Dublin there. That's a poor guy. How about Jaxson Dart? Doesn't have Malik Nabers. Now he goes on the road. He's dealing a little bit of a hammy his own right, although they said he's going to play. Gets a road game at the Saints. Bryce Young or Jaxson Dart?
Boy, that's actually really close for me. I think I would chance it on Bryce Young. I think I would. There's in theory, the rushing floor with Jaxson Dart, and I think if you're just kind of playing to not lose, and you're like, all right, I just need to get to like 12 points, then maybe I would go Jaxson Dart because I think he can give you 8 carries for 55 yards or something like that. But the Saints defense is not that bad. They had the disaster game against Seattle a couple weeks ago. A lot of that was like special teams inflicted and just early mistakes. That game got away from them. The other 3 games have been close, and they've played mostly lower scoring games. Jaxson Dart was very, very limited as a passer in terms of what the Giants allowed him to do. You're taking Malik Nabers out of the equation. And I think given the volume, given the matchup, that was kind of the best case scenario last week. Like, I don't know if you can count on a passing touchdown that came, after a turnover on a very short field, a rushing touchdown to begin the game. So those two are pretty comparable to me. But I think there's a little bit more upside perhaps this week with Bryce Young just because of that matchup against a Miami defense I don't think is very good.
Bryce Young, Jaxson Dart, or Sam Darnold. Home game against the Bucs this week. Darnold's looking pretty, at least he's a solid floor play. I think he's looking better than I expected him to so far. Really is connected with JSN. We spent no time talking about the Thursday game last week, and it wasn't Darnold's best game, but it was also a road game in a short week. I think the long rest at home against the Bucs. What do you think?
Easy Darnold for me. Easy Darnold for me. Buccaneers have been really good against the run. They're number 2 in the NFL in terms of opponent rushing success rate. They're number 2 in opponent EPA against the run. So this is a game I think Seattle's going to have to put a little bit more on Sam Darnold, which might not be a bad thing. I think on balance, we've seen more of last season's version of Sam Darnold than we have the previous version. So I think Seattle trusts him. He's got great chemistry going on with JSN. Torrey Horton feels like kind of a guy who's ready to emerge. They got 2-3 tight ends that they use kind of interchangeably. All those guys are varying degrees of weapons. So that's pretty easily Darnold.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. So that would be my streaming quarterback this week. And let's face it, we're going to have to stream some quarterbacks this week. I know I will. I've got Caleb Williams and some exposure there. I've got some Penix exposure. It's going to be tough. Jordan Love, I don't really have anywhere there, but he's another guy that's going to be missing this week as well. We had carnage on Monday night. It's been a rough week for injuries, but Tyreek Hill's gruesome knee injury has to be one of the lead stories here. Not just an ACL, but multiple ligaments and a dislocated kneecap. This might be career-ending, let alone season-ending for him.
Yeah, it could be. It could be. And, I mean, this is one that I did everything I could to avoid, Jeff. As soon as I kind of like half saw it in real time, and then I was like, all right, I need to just shut it down and not see a video of this because I absolutely hate seeing these gruesome injuries. I did accidentally see it. It was way up there on the scale of disgusting injuries. So if you're like me and you don't like it and you haven't seen it, do not seek it out. I don't like when people tweet this stuff out there, knowing that there are people that don't want to see it, but that was beside the point. I mean, I'm not ready to call it curtains on Tyreek Hill's career. He's a guy in his 30s. It certainly will alter his career. There's definitely a chance we don't see him again. He's obviously done for the season. And I mean, we're talking dislocated kneecap, we're talking tendon damage. So this is something that even if he, makes a concerted big time effort to come back for next season, it might not be week 1, right? I mean, we could be talking about, mid-season at best. So Hard to even say what that looks like, right? Is Tyreek Hill still a member of the Miami Dolphins? Where's he at that point? Both in terms of, physical performance, in terms of off-field stuff. So kind of too early to speculate on his future, but obviously done for the year. That's a boost for Jalen Waddle. It's probably a slight boost for Darren Waller. And then, kind of opens things up for those secondary receivers in Miami.
Yeah. Malik Washington is going to be a pickup target for sure. And, I even think in shallower leagues, you think about picking him up, kind of slides right into Hill's slot in his role. Similar sort, obviously it's kind of the bargain basement version of Tyreek Hill, but similar size, speed, kind of combo, not a big receiver. Waller will get the goal line targets like we saw, the end zone targets that we saw like last week there, I think more often than not. But I think Washington is also a pickup there. Would you prefer Washington or would you prefer Darius Slayton on the Giants, assuming like Wan'Dale Robinson's already taken, with Malik Nabers out for the season? There's an opportunity opening up there. Slayton or Washington? Who do you got?
I would probably take my chances with Malik Washington. Kind of fits that Dolphins receiver mold, right? Just this like super quick water bug type of wide receiver who I think they'll nobody could be Tyreek Hill, but I think they could kind of try to use him in that same way alongside Waddle. I mean, with Slayton, he's playing a ton of snaps. He's running a ton of routes. Like even before Nabers went down, he was still leading the Giants in snaps a lot of weeks, and he's going to be playing 85+%. You would think going forward, but he just wasn't seeing anything from Russell Wilson. He did end up being the Giants' leading receiver this past week, but I think that was on 3 catches on 4 targets. Like I very much worry about the volume for the Giants. I think later in the season maybe they do open things up for Jaxson Dart, and without Nabers, obviously there are targets available. I think there's more upside with Malik Washington. I think if you're looking for safety, I would go Slayton.
Yeah, and I'm worried about the depth of target too. Slayton's like that guy that needs to be fed deep balls, and I just don't know if that's going to happen with Dart. I think they're trying to do everything they can to avoid those type of plays if they can, just because I think there's some accuracy concerns. It's just not what they want. We saw it in the comments earlier, but Theo Johnson is a target for me. There's 3 tight ends I think are worth picking up, at least 3 that are worth picking up this week, maybe 4 even. We talked about Waller, Theo Johnson, Mason Taylor on the Jets, and then I go Tongas on the Niners as well this week, who seems like he's getting more than like 1 or 2 targets per game.
Yeah. I mean, I don't love the matchup this week. San Francisco has just a ton of injuries right now. I don't know if we're going to see Brock Purdy out there, but the injuries at wide receiver, I guess in theory, kind of help Tongas because there's just nothing left. Like there's a real chance that both Juwan Jennings and Ricky Pearsall could miss this game. Brandon Ayuk seems nowhere close to returning. And then you're looking at, Kendrick Bourne, Demarcus Robinson, Sky Moore. I would rather Mac Jones start this game on a short week. Really tough matchup either way going up against the Rams. But I think at this point, based on what I saw for Purdy last week against the Jags, like I think a full strength Mac Jones is better than like a 70% Brock Purdy. And it sounds like that toe was re-aggravated this week, so he'd probably be even less healthy than he was on Sunday when it looked like he couldn't really step into throws. Todd, like most of these fringy tight end guys, Todd just will probably be pretty touchdown dependent. Like if you put him in a lineup, you're going to need a touchdown for that to pay off. But he's got 2 scores in 4 games. He was targeted 5 times last week against what's turned into a really good Jaguars defense. But you also are, if you're picking him up, you're doing it with the understanding that there is, a limitation here because the hope is that George Kittle's back in a couple weeks.
Yeah, exactly there. So, I lean towards those other 3 as well before Tongas there. By the way, there is a AM/PM as a convenience store chain out here on the West Coast. They have a similar character with a similar last name. So I conflate the 2 all the time. Complete, utter useless aside, but thought I'd mention it anyhow. There. That's a good segue into our first read for the day. Thanks to Vivid Seats. NFL is back. Don't just sit on the couch. Lock in your seat this season with the Vivid Seats app, where you're scored the lowest price tickets guaranteed. That's right. Vivid Seats is introducing their new lowest price guarantee, so you know that you're getting the best deal all season long. Seriously, try to find a cheaper ticket. Every rushing yard, red zone pass, and jaw-dropping play of your favorite team live and in person. And here's the kicker. When you buy with the Vivid Seats app, you rack up rewards and free credits. That's your personal home field advantage. And if that wasn't enough, Vivid Seats is offering you $20 off your first $200 ticket purchase with code RotoWire. That's code RotoWire, RotoWire. So suit up this NFL season. Download the Vivid Seats app to get the best deal in the game with the best prices. Terms apply. I used the Vivid Seats app just on Sunday night when I booked Reds Dodgers for Wednesday for game 2. So I can guarantee you I use this product. I think it's great. It's worked out before me in the past as well. So Vivid Seats, thank you for your sponsorship. Let's talk about the Houston Texans and Woody Marks. You don't even want to talk too much about Houston versus Tennessee because that was ugly, but Marks looked good. Marks looks like he's going to be getting an increasing snap share, and we know Joe Mixon's not coming back anytime soon.
Yeah, that's the big thing here is, not only is Woody Marks, really starting to feel like he's grabbing hold of that job, but there's been no news and certainly nothing positive on Joe Mixon. We're kind of in this zone where the Texans have vaguely said that, maybe we'll get an update in mid-October. And when asked directly about Mixon returning this season, it's extremely non-committal. So even if Joe Mixon is activated later in the year, I just wonder what version of Joe Mixon it's going to be. By that point, maybe Woody Marks has ripped off a few big games and it's kind of an afterthought. But Marks has gone from 11% to 27% to 48% to 58% in terms of that snap share over the last 4 games. And, 17 for 69 and a touchdown last week, was targeted 5 times out of the backfield, 4 for 50 and another score. A lot of that did come late. You're going up against the Tennessee Titans. There are caveats we can throw out there. But I think Woody Marks is startable this week going up against Baltimore. I think intuitively you would say it's the Ravens. I don't, it's a bad matchup. Ravens defense is not good. It's just not good. And it's extremely banged up. And I think this is actually a pretty decent spot for the Houston Texans. Still not a good offense overall. The offensive line is a huge issue. But I don't know if the Ravens in their current state are any better defensively than Tennessee, to be honest.
Yeah. That is a good question there. Just all the injuries they have and just the performance that they've had so far. So I agree that. Yeah. Now the problem with this is twofold. One, how much are we bidding of our free agent budget? How aggressive are we going to go after Marks when, who knows, like you mentioned on SXM, maybe Brian Robinson's coming down the line later on, or, there's going to be other pickups later on. How good of an opportunity is this given the Houston offensive line? And 2, who do we got to drop? I saw in the comments here, like, Dana Coleman was asking, do I drop Travion Henderson to pick up Woody Marks? And I can't say yes to that. I don't know. I can't drop Travion Henderson, even though I get it. It's frustrating, looking at the snapshot Henderson has, looking at how, we saw Antonio Gibson getting goal line carries last week. Nice troll job there by Mike Vrabel. Henderson did get a touchdown, look good in brief circumstances, but my goodness, I need that snap share sooner rather than later. Who do you drop?
Yeah, with Henderson, it's like I'm still terrified to drop him. I'm holding him in a bunch of leagues. I actually haven't started him the last couple of weeks after kind of taking an upside shot on him the first couple of weeks of the season. You thought this would be the spot, right? It's Carolina. It's a bad defense. You got Antonio Gibson coming off of a fumble. You got Ramondre coming off of a couple of fumbles in the last game, and you thought maybe that would be the pivot point. And even in a game that had plenty of garbage time, Patriots were leading big for most of it. Travion Henderson plays 15 snaps, and he good for him, I guess. He was targeted or carried on 9 of those, but we still saw a lot of Ramondre. We still saw Gibson mixing in. I don't know if Vrabel is just hanging on to this pass protection kind of caveat for why he's not throwing Henderson out there more. I will say there was one play where Henderson, if he breaks one tackle, he probably rips off a long touchdown, and maybe we're having a different conversation, but he also didn't break the tackle, so you can't just say, oh, that should have been a touchdown. It's like, you got to actually make the move to get by that defender. I will say, they're on the road at the Bills. They're big underdogs. That number will probably get to 8.5 by the end of the week, but Bills defense hasn't been that great, gave up a ton of fantasy points to Derrick Henry in week 1, has played some close games against some pretty shaky teams the last couple of weeks. And we're still waiting, on Matt Milano and Ed Oliver as far as their status for this week. So even though I think the Patriots probably lose that game, I don't think it's a brutal matchup necessarily.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm kind of of the mindset there to hang on to Henderson. And I even started him in a league last week, got lucky with that touchdown. I think better times are coming ahead, but man, it's tough. And this is the good tension you feel in fantasy football though. And this is why I as much as I love the NFFC, and I do, I hate the 20-man rosters. You need to have tough decisions to make. You need the waiver wire to be better. You need the Woody Markses of the world to be out there to be able to pick up instead of just stashed on every single team's roster.
Yeah, no, for sure. For sure. And, there are so many of these kind of borderline, running back, borderline handcuff type of guys. I mean, Marks is the guy to me that I think has a very clear opportunity, like immediately to take over that job, right? A lot of the other running backs that we talk about is like, yeah, Blake Corum. It's like, yeah, but there's always like a caveat of like, he needs an injury. I don't know if Woody Marks needs that injury.
Exactly. And Joe Mixon's not coming back anytime soon. And Nick Chubb just looks okay, not great. So I'm kind of the mindset there that, it's now the only problem is the Houston offense line is going to be terrible all season long. That's the one thing I think is going to be an issue there. So there's a limited amount of upside in the long run there.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to other possible pickups. Kendre Miller, 5% rostered on Yahoo as of yesterday, probably a little higher with the early runs and fab that we're starting to see. Got the first touchdown for the Saints. It wasn't a fluke. He was in the game a lot. He was in the game in the red zone a lot too. He's not a pass catcher is the only negative, but this is also a team that's not throwing to their backs as much. Right. I still like what I'm seeing out of Kendre Miller.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think to me, a lot of the eye test and a lot of the numbers would say that he's been just as effective, if not more effective than Alvin Kamara this season. The Saints are just running kind of a different style of offense. Like for so long, during the Drew Brees years, obviously, and even the last couple of years, they would, make a concerted effort to kind of run things through getting the ball to Alvin Kamara out of the backfield. And now they are 29th in the NFL in terms of throwing to running back. So it's kind of crushed the value of Alvin Kamara. A tough situation here where, the Saints for so long have just like refused to admit that they're rebuilding. And now it's finally come for them. They have no choice. And yet you still re-signed Alvin Kamara to an extension last year. So to me, it would be like an obvious trade candidate to try to get off of Kamara. I don't know if the Saints will actually go in that direction. I think as long as Kamara is healthy, it's going to be tough for Kendre Miller to have that true starting upside on a weekly basis. I think the hope is that if they don't part ways with Kamara, which it's probably likely that they don't, that, eventually they just kind of say, look, over the second half of the year, we got to go into more of an evaluation period. It'll be more of a 50-50 split between those two backs. Yeah,
I think that's certainly a possible outcome there. I'm just looking for any sort of upside too. I'm just looking for, I think it's important to keep churning those bottom roster spots. It gets tougher during bye weeks. We start focusing in on the, just what we need in this week, especially like if you have like a week 5. I have a lot of leagues with week 5 and week 10 concentrations there where I'm going to be scrambling a lot. Harder to stash guys in those weeks, but in other weeks, you should be doing that more often, just churning that bottom roster spot. If you're not using it, if it's a guy you're not saving for a particular reason, go grab that up, take a chance on those sort of guys there a little bit there. I'm wondering, one thing we haven't talked about at all is the Pittsburgh Steelers and Kenneth Gainwell. He was so productive. He's clearly been the number 2, even when Jaylen Warren's been healthy. Warren misses a game, which is tends to do. And Gainwell comes in and is very productive. Steelers are on bye this week, so of course nobody's talking about picking up Gainwell, but he's out there. He's available. I looked again on him, 23% rostered in Yahoo leagues, and he's probably not going to go up that much higher. If you've got the empty roster spot, you don't have that crunch. I mean, he's a free pickup right now.
Yeah, I think it's tough because obviously the Steelers have a bye this week, and you feel good about Jaylen Warren's chances to be back for week 6. So I think that'll throw some cold water on the performance that we saw out of Gainwell this past week against Minnesota. But he actually saw a lower percentage of snaps this week than he had in any game so far this season. Like he's been involved, Jaylen Warren's still going to be the guy to own in Pittsburgh, but we've seen this with Gainwell in Philly too. Like, not so much last year when Saquon was so dominant, but before Saquon showed up, like Gainwell's always this number 2 guy. He's kind of an afterthought, but if you pick the right week, like this past week, he could be fine. Like he's a pretty high level number 2 guy and a really good pass catcher as well. 6 catches on 6 targets this past week. And, in the event that Jaylen Warren misses any more time, he's an obvious start, but I think he's somebody just to kind of keep in your back pocket, if nothing else, because still got a long season ahead. There could be another injury coming for Jaylen Warren.
Yeah, there could be, very easily could be. This podcast is brought to you by the folks at Megasports Progressive. Elevate your game with the ultimate sports contest, Megasports Progressive. Dive into a world of excitement with 3 progressive jackpots and a chance to win big every week and every month. We're rewarding 1,500 lucky winners, distributing over $50,000 in monthly prizes. All you do is answer 15 daily sports props. Add up your correct responses for the week's cash prizes and tally the week's totals for huge monthly cash rewards. Megasports Pro Megasports Pro makes it fun and easy to join. This is a thrilling opportunity to be part of our growing community of sports enthusiasts. Sign up today and unlock a chance to win big every day, every week, and every month. Sign up is free, no commitments, no credit cards. Your first 9 days of play are free. Visit megasportspro.com today. Thanks to Megasports for joining us on the RotoWire podcast. Let's talk a little Bengals, Nick. It's ugly. It doesn't look like it's getting better anytime soon.
No, it doesn't. And this is, I think, maybe the most difficult fantasy situation to try to evaluate right now, because you have like pretty much the universal 1-1 on this team who's done nothing outside of that one big game against Jacksonville with Jake Browning, by the way, handling a lot of that. And, T. Higgins has been maybe the single biggest bust so far this season. There's an obvious reason for it, but nonetheless, a guy who's, I think, outside the top 60 right now in terms of wide receivers, aggregate fantasy points through 4 weeks. The Bengals in general, man, it's been a disaster. And, I thought we'd see a little bit better effort out of Jake Browning. Again, that game against the Jaguars, I think has aged pretty well because of how the Jags defense has played. These last 2 games have been a complete disaster. What have they been outscored? 73-13, something like that, over these last 2 games. Kind of cowardly play calling, I thought, last night. You need to be aggressive. You just got to try everything if you're Zach Taylor at this point, to try to hang around in these games and just give yourself a chance with those playmakers. And it's really tough for me to see a way out in the immediate future, because you're getting the Detroit Lions this week. You're going to be the biggest dog on the board. And then you go to the Green Bay Packers coming out of their bye in week 6. I think that's a defense that's going to play significantly better than it did last week against Dallas. Things somewhat lighten up after that. Steelers, Jets, Bears, Steelers, Patriots. Like those are palatable matchups. Like I'm at the point where I'm probably not selling low on Jamar Chase unless I can really get something that I feel good about. I think it's just as simple as like, he's Jamar Chase and there's still going to be splash games. Very worried about T. Higgins and Chase Brown, man. I mean, I asked you straight up on XM today. It's like, would you consider dropping Chase Brown? I think it's a legit question.
I wouldn't, but I get it. And I certainly would. I would bench Chase Brown, but I would never drop him. He's still the primary back on the team. That's never going to change. I don't, barring an injury. Would I start Woody Marks over Chase Brown this week? Yeah, probably.
Yes. No
probably
question.
So. Yeah. And I had Brown at like 30 this past week. Here's the thing. He did catch some passes. He was a little bit better in the run game. If God forbid the Bengals ever get a goal line situation again, it'll probably be Brown again. But he doesn't move piles with his bulk. That's the thing. He needs a little bit of space to operate there. And that is the tough part. I don't think he's ever a drop, but at the same time, I get benching him, and I get the, being down with him, I think you probably could find a trade if you're that down on Chase Brown for the rest of the year. I think it's important not to judge it based on the Minnesota-Denver games, because those are 2 tough spots.
I agree. I mean, the Minnesota game just got away from them early on. That one you just kind of throw out. Like when you turn the ball over 5 times against what's a pretty good defense, that one to me is just whatever. But I don't know. The Denver game, man, I mean, I know Denver's a good defense, but you got to be able to mount something offensively. And outside of that first drive of the game, there was just nothing there for Cincinnati. And, they're still trying things down the field. There's just nothing open. Jake Browning doesn't have a ton of time. And the fact that he doesn't have a running game to fall back on or a good defense to fall back on, like you could argue that the latter is maybe good for fantasy, but the Bengals weren't really putting the pedal to the metal, I thought, in the way that they should have to try to get back into that game. And I don't really know what the goal is right now for Zach Taylor. Like, is it, and I asked you this morning as well. It's like, does the Burrow injury just kind of bail him out for another year? And it's like, well, lost season, what were we supposed to do? I mean, you saw him kind of Jamar Chase going at him, I should say, on the sideline late in that game. Like, I think the players are kind of starting to sense the lack of urgency as well. Again, there's a path out for Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. I don't know if I see it with Chase Brown. I know it's been a tough schedule, but again, it's not like we're talking about like week 7, week 8, like, oh, maybe that could be a spot where Chase Brown is borderline startable. Like that's the conversation now.
Yeah, I get it. Maybe it's just I'm an eternal optimist, and I just saw too much out of Chase Brown before. I don't think his skills have changed enough to do that there. But it's not going to be pretty this week either, though, against Detroit. I think if you look at what happened, if you look at the line, it opened up at 8.5. I think it's latest I saw is up to 10 now. For the Lions. What I would definitely do is bet the under on the team total for the Bengals. I think there will be better times when the schedule does open up, but it's going to be a few more weeks, and that's the really tough part there. But yeah, it's ugly. I don't think the Bengals fire Taylor in season because I just think that's the Bengals way. But it's close. It's close. I haven't been the one calling for Taylor's head before, and last night was the first time I'm like, these are not serious people. And it's not just it's not just the score, it's not just the lack of aggression, it's also like this the utter lack of discipline, the penalties. Maybe things are down, but at least you should be well coached. At least you should be having the discipline not to commit stupid penalties, like lining up incorrectly. But no, they do that all the time.
Yeah, it was tough to watch last night, man. It was. And there's, I think there's just kind of a collective like lack of faith in what they're doing right now. And, again, but Browning, maybe we have to give him a little more credit for what he's done in the past. Like he's been able to keep them afloat. He's been able to make them a competitive team. And, if you want to chalk it up to bad matchups against Brian Flores and then the Denver Broncos, you could do that. But again, I think you got two more coming your way these next couple of weeks. So you're just in a really tough spot. If you have those Bengals guys, I think it's really hard to get off of Higgins and Chase Brown right now. I mean, you're accepting scraps.
Yeah. Agreed. I think that's a real problem there. All right. We talked on the Sirius XM show about this, but I'd like to talk about here the Sunday night game, Packers-Cowboys. So much material to work with there. A lot of discontent in Packers land. For the Packers playing for the tie, playing not to lose at the end of overtime there.
Just a lot to say about what the Green Bay Packers did. And the overtime stuff, I mean, that's almost a separate conversation. But, Packers marched down the field. They put up 2 touchdowns early in this game. And like they've done so many times, like it's like Matt LaFleur wants to just like ensure that the other team doesn't feel too bad about how the game goes. Like the Cowboys defense might legitimately be the worst in the NFL. I mean, if you look at these last couple of weeks, what the Giants did to them, what the Bears did to them, what the Packers just did to them. There was a 4th and 2 at basically midfield. Packers take a delay a game and punt. Later on, you have a 4th and 5 at essentially midfield punt. I just don't get it. I don't get it. These are spots where Matt LaFleur would always go for it, where a lot of coaches now just auto go for it, especially with the weapons that you have, the way your quarterback is playing right now. Jordan Love was incredible, I thought, on Sunday night. And the Packers go conservative there. And then before the half, you have like 28 seconds and 1 timeout. And that's when you decide to hit the gas and try to pick up 40 yards and get into field goal range. It's not totally on the floor that the offensive line crumbled and Love didn't do a good job protecting the ball. But I thought that was the biggest swing in the game, giving the Cowboys the momentum, giving them the lead heading into half. And, losing Devontae Wyatt from that defense just totally crumbled. A brutal defensive game, I thought, from Green Bay. Could not get off the field. At one point gave up, I think, was it 5 touchdowns and 6 drives?
Yeah.
Even in overtime, it's like, yeah, you get the field goal, but you gave up like another 6+ minute drive to that Dallas team. And, the Packers opt to kick in overtime, which I get the idea of like, you want to know what you need, right? You need to, are we going for it on 4th down? Do we need a touchdown? Whatever. There's only 10 minutes on the clock, man. And the Packers got to the 40-yard line. They needed a 4th down conversion, by the way, to get there. Great throw, great route from Love to Matthew Golden. But the Packers get to the 40-yard line and they operated the rest of the game like they were at the 5-yard line. Yeah. It was just insane. The amount of time you're running off, you run an outside running play. I think it was Emmanuel Wilson, goes down inbounds. That's the most obvious spot to take a timeout. No, you let 20 seconds roll off the clock. You run a bubble screen that gets blown up for -3 yards. Then you take the timeout and you continue to throw the ball inbounds. I don't believe this idea that like, oh, Matt LaFleur was playing for the tie. I don't think he was. I think it was just horrible clock management.
I think they were so paranoid about Brandon Aubrey that they want to do everything to make sure Dallas didn't get the ball back on them, that they didn't even have 15 seconds. That and their own defense was not doing well. I mean, they clearly couldn't stop Dallas. And it was wild to see that. So the so-called number 1 defense in the league has 1 injury and all of a sudden, they're that exploitable. I mean, Nate Hobbs was banged up. You could tell that he was not himself. There's a play where I thought he got concussed, and they gave up the touchdown to Ferguson the next play. And then he got checked out later on. And I'm sure that was some of it. Now, Ferguson kind of bodied him anyhow on the touchdown. He might have been able to do it anyways, but it was a case where, like, it's not that if the Jenga tower is that fragile, then what are we looking at here? I mean, I was really underwhelmed by this Packers defense, but regardless, they were so paranoid about leaving like a minute or two for the Cowboys that they were milking the clock almost purposefully, and they almost didn't get that last snap off. The third down play was with 1 second left. The clock operator is a little more biased. If he's got a less itchy of a trigger finger, you never know. They could have run out of time. They could have had a pre-snap penalty before that play even. We saw like Kraft was lining up a yard in front of the line of scrimmage. They had to reset. It was crazy how poorly run that was.
Again, you almost have to like break it down in segments because there were so many insane mistakes down the stretch. And the almost not getting the field goal off to tie this game and like just walk into the locker room with your tail between your legs is like, to me, somehow the most egregious of all this. Like, I don't know if that's on the floor. I don't know if that's on Love. Everybody watching this game is like, they're not going to get this off. They're not going to get this off. How do you not just spike the ball in that scenario? Like, you can't take the risk. And like, Love doesn't really throw lasers. He throws these floaters.
Yeah.
Like, they are extremely lucky. That clock justifiably could have hit 0. No question. And I don't think anybody would have complained about it. I was shocked that there was a second left on the clock. I mean, to scramble to the line, clearly not have a plan, and then just like throw the ball away, just spike it at that point. You're playing for the field goal. But what I don't get about all this is like Green Bay had the advantages offensively to score a touchdown there. If you score a touchdown, the game is over. Like, why? I don't think they were playing for the field goal. I think they were cognizant of, not leaving time for Aubrey, but just go score the touchdown and the game's over.
Right.
Like they were acting like a touchdown would have put them like up 2 points and then the game wouldn't have been over. Like, I truly don't understand it. And once again, LaFleur was like not pressed on this really at all by the media after the game. They asked him a couple questions, but like this is 2 weeks in a row that these games have been wildly mismanaged by Matt LaFleur, and not being more aggressive in the second half too. I know the Packers were scoring, but you look at Jordan Love's like passing chart in that game, just green dots all over the line of scrimmage to both sides. Like you could throw all over the Dallas defense, and over and over they're opting for these more conservative plays. We saw a completely different version of the Packers weeks 1 and 2 when they smacked the Lions, they smacked the Commanders. Jordan Love had 25 combined throws beyond 10 yards. He has 9 total over the last 2 weeks.
Yeah. And how many times were we talking about the Packers being, seated at the table, one of the teams that are the best in the NFL? This is a devastating result to tie against the Cowboys. You're playing for seeding. You're playing, you think you're playing for seeding, coming off of a loss to the Browns too, like that. We don't have to revisit that, but it's devastating all along. Just that's a horrible result. It's not like, oh, at least they didn't lose. Well, no, getting a tie is terrible. This is supposed to be a win, and it wasn't. I'm glad all these Survivor people were eliminated with the Packers. You didn't deserve to advance when you're taking a road team like that, especially that early on. I say that, and I might be taking the Lions against the Bengals this week. We'll see. I probably won't, but nonetheless, it is kind of a crazy thing there. All right, got a couple other topics we want to hit on, but first, we're going to talk a little bit about our friends over at Chalkboard. Cash in on your NFL picks this season with Chalkboard. Simply choose more or less on your favorite player stats to win up to 5,000 times your money. For a limited time only, new players get $20 free with no deposit required. Yes, you heard that right. $20 free just on sign up. See why over 1 million fans have already locked in with Chalkboard to turn their sports knowledge into cold, hard cash. Whether you're looking into the perfect slip with alternate lines, using the cash out feature to take your money and run, or hammering the daily promos, today's your chance to win up to $40,000 on a single entry. Stop sitting on the sidelines. Get into the game with Chalkboard Fantasy Sports. Now available in 30-plus states. Download Chalkboard today and use promo code ROTONFL. That's ROTONFL to get $20 free with no deposit required. Thanks to Chalkboard for their sponsorship of this show. Nick, again, I made you wait to talk Jaguars here. Let's do it. They got a big road win at San Francisco. They're forcing turnovers. They are hosting Monday night against the Chiefs. They're 3-1. Life is good, right?
Life is good, man. The Teal Curtain is back. 13 forced turnovers through these first 4 games. The last time the Jags had a really dominant defense was that 2017 year when they made it all the way to the AFC title game. That was, of course, the Miles Jack wasn't down situation against the Steelers. That team forced 11 turnovers through 4 games. So 13, I mean, at least 3 turnovers forced in every game, which is crazy and unlikely to continue. But Devin Lloyd is playing at an all-pro level at linebacker. They did a lot of this without Trayvon Walker, by the way, who went out early in this game. He's dealing with a wrist injury. Looks like he's going to miss some time. They're hoping, it's not too extensive, but we're really able to get after, Brock Purdy. Was only sacked once, but forced Brock Purdy into a lot of uncomfortable throws, a lot of uncomfortable positions. To me, all those turnovers were pretty legitimate, right? Like some fumble luck that's going to happen. And they did recover 3 fumbles in this game, but these were like legitimate punch outs, right? Like this defense is hunting the ball on a week-to-week basis. I still want to caution a little bit on the offense. Like I think the Jags are really well coached offensively. The passing game, to me, it's still a little shaky. There's still like 3 or 4 plays per game where you're just like, how is that not a turnover? And, Lawrence did throw a pick that ended up being called back on a penalty. It was very fortunate. This was not like a free play scenario. So I'm pumping the brakes a little bit. I know there are some books where the Jags are 3-point dogs at home to KC this week. I think things could come crashing down a little bit with how that Kansas City team looks right now. Like I'm not ready to anoint the Jaguars as like this, dark horse AFC championship type of team. But defensively, they're playing at a crazy level. The running game is so much better than it was last season. Travis Etienne, another big run for a touchdown this past week, but still not fully there on Brian Thomas. He ended up being the Jags leading receiver, 5 for 49 on 7 targets. A lot of stuff outside. They're kind of making an effort, it feels like, to not run him over the middle. They're not really generating a ton of big plays. The only passing play that went for more than 20 yards was a really nice catch by Travis Hunter going up to get it over the middle of the field. He went 3 for 42, played a lot more on offense this week. So, the Jags are 3-1. There's a very strong case to be made that they should be 4-0. Their only loss came to Jake Browning in that game, where Jake Browning threw 3 picks coming on in relief. I'm still tempering my expectations, though, at least for this passing game.
Yeah. And I know you were even thinking about using the Chiefs in Survivor this week.
Oh, yeah.
Good luck. But I wouldn't do that.
In one of my 4 entries, not all of them. I think I might do it. Although the Chiefs play the Raiders at home in a couple weeks. I don't know. You've kind of talked me off the ledge on that one.
I think you can find better spots for both the Chiefs and I think for your Jags as well. I think they're at home. I mean, if it's in KC, maybe we're talking a little differently here. You never know. Duval can get hype, as our friend Clay Link likes to say. So we'll see about that. Not the Duval part, but the get hype part. He definitely does say. We have that recorded instance there, but yeah, I don't think I would do that there, but I guess you're saying the Chiefs are back though. I guess that is, if you're thinking about that, you're pretty sold on that performance against the Ravens.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that was, self-inflicted by Baltimore just not being good, but I think the Chiefs defense has been now really, really good for 3 straight weeks. And I think just having Xavier Worthy back, even if he wasn't at full capacity last week, made a big difference. He hit a deep ball down the field. I thought opened things up a lot more for Travis Kelce. I don't think the Chiefs are fully back. I think they will be close to fully back when they get Rashee Rice in a few weeks. That is when the Chiefs will really take off. I think this was a really important win to not be backed into this, 1-3 corner. They're sitting at 2-2. They're favored on the road this week. And I mean, that was the first time that the Chiefs have looked remotely explosive in 2 years. I mean, when's the last time the Chiefs have put up that kind of number?
Yeah, there's like random pockets, like the Christmas game against the Steelers. They looked kind of explosive. The game against the Bills in the playoffs, they did too. But that was Elam, like being on the island there in that game. They were able to exploit the heck out of that. So, right. But yeah, it's few and far between. I was surprised how much Xavier Worthy transformed this offense, though. That they not only with what he did, but by making team like Baltimore account for him. I thought was noteworthy there. I was really pleasantly surprised to see how much he made an impact.
Yeah, absolutely. And, again, just having that speed threat out there, I know they brought in some guys who are in theory fast receivers to try to replicate that, but teams just aren't really buying it. It's like Tyquan Thornton had the one big catch down the field against the Giants, but so many of the big plays that the Chiefs have generated have all felt, I wouldn't say lucky, but just they have to work so hard to get them, where it's like Mahomes has to scramble around and whip it across his body and hopefully you get a DPI call. This was the first game in a while where things felt easy for the Chiefs.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right about that. All right. we've got an AMA going on over at Reddit. You can catch me on FanDuel TV later. We're going to do rankings podcast tomorrow. Before we get on out of here, the Thursday night game, Rams versus the Niners. We talked about the Niners side a little bit. We haven't talked about the Rams yet, and big win for them against the Colts. Let's finish with Rams talk.
Yeah, for one, I love the Rams in this spot. I don't know how you can with how banged up the Niners are, not knowing if Brock Purdy is going to be out there. We're looking at possibly your top 3 pass catchers in Kittle, Jennings, and Pearsall all not playing. Nick Bosa's out for the year. Short week, something weird can happen, divisional game, but I think this should be a nice spot for the Rams. Impressive win, of course, over the Colts. I think the Colts put up the fights that most people expected, right? Like, I was on the Rams -3.5. But I did not expect that to be easy. And, if Daniel Jones doesn't turn it over on the first possession of the game, maybe that does play out differently. If A.D. Mitchell doesn't drop a touchdown, if A.D. Mitchell doesn't have a hold that didn't really affect the play on a Jonathan Taylor touchdown, the Colts maybe win that outright. So
they have 11 players on the field for the Tutu Atwell play. I mean, maybe brutal. That doesn't
88 yards. 88 yards. I mean, that's it. I mean, there are a lot of things I think to unpack here if we want to get into it. Like, this was yet another just ridiculous Puka Nacua game. Just it feels like every time he touches the ball, it's a first down. He had a huge 4th down conversion. They caught a touchdown shortly after that. Just the way that he's opened things up for Devontae Adams to be this incredibly high level number 2. I mean, you always worry every week because Puka is going to make his weekly trip to the tent, but he's come out of it every time. And that's what's important so far. I mean, he has been far and away the best receiver, I think, in football and in fantasy so far this season. Should mention, Blake Corum continues to mix in behind Kyron Williams. This was like the least effective that he's looked in terms of the production, but, still seeing that 20 to 30% snap share on a weekly basis, somebody I'm interested in as a handcuff. And then, on the Colts side of things, like, I don't feel any worse about the Colts. Like, Daniel Jones finally turned it over a couple of times. One of those was basically a desperation throw at the end of the game, but the Colts played well enough to go win this game on the road against what might be one of the 5 best teams in the NFL.
Yeah. And I think a hidden aspect of this game too was Kenny Moore was hurt. Their slot corner there. He's out with an Achilles injury. The Colts signed former Bengal Mike Hilton to be their slot corner for this game. They signed him to the practice squad and he played 53 snaps, which tells you they're a little light at that spot there a little bit there. And who's the wrong team to have a not so good covering slot corner? It's against the Rams. How many times do you line up Puka in the slot? I mean, Puka went off in this game. Tutu Atwell, I think on that might have been in the slot on that big play. I know they ran a little crisscross there and the Colts got tied up, but the 10 of them that were on the field at least were.
Yeah, Nacua has been awesome, man. Stafford has been totally dialed in. It feels insane that a month ago we were sitting here like, that back injury, Stafford's probably going to be rusty. I mean, he's still throwing out, 5-6 throws per game where you're just like, my goodness, man, the arm angles, the anticipation, he's been so good.
I'm light on Puka because of the Stafford concerns, and man, I'm hating life because of that there. Funny comment from Captain Moistbeard here. He said, thought Puka was in the locker room, and then he just shows up on camera with the first down catch. We were talking about that. Every game, Puka gets looked at some point in time. And then he shows up and is a monster again after that.
Yeah, I mean, the fear is that one of these times it's going to be a real injury, right? And it's not just like a hit to the head where he's bleeding or a small tweak, because that's the reason that I mostly stayed away from Puka Nacua. Is you're just like, when he's out there, he's awesome. We all know that, but is he going to play 16 games or is he going to play 11 games? And that fear is never fully going to be out of your mind. But man, I mean, both he and Amon-Ra St. Brown, I was like shooting for the upside, quote unquote, with Brian Thomas, with Drake London, with Nico Collins in that range. And man, Puka and St. Brown have been the answers.
Absolutely. That is the answer on the turn. And Jonathan Taylor at that range too is someone that would have been beautiful there too. All right. That's going to wrap up today's podcast. Big thanks to everybody that was jumping in on the comments. Again, catch us live over on Reddit right now. We're answering your questions there if you didn't get them answered here. And of course, I've got the rankings podcast tomorrow, guest about trying to get close to nailing down the confirmation on our guest for that there. So I won't announce it just yet, but we'll have all sorts of content for you for the week. Of course, the value meter will be up on the site. Check out all of our work over at RotoWire. Use promo code YouTube15 to get 15% off any RotoWire subscription. Thanks for tuning in with us today. Good luck in week 5.